Coming right back, but in the meantime, Senator Braun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The baseline 2018 last Farm Bill was $867 billion over 10 years. The new baseline is about $1.43 trillion over 10 years. Being an ex-governor of a state, are you concerned in terms of our total financial health? When I looked at the president's recent budget, that shows us $51 trillion in debt in 10 years, and to where we are getting into uncharted territory. Historically, regardless of the tax rate, we generally average around 17.5% to 18% of our GDP and what we can raise in revenues through the federal government. Occasionally it has spiked to 19 to 20, sometimes it's lower. We're now taking total spending up to close to 25% of GDP. Is that something that worries you? And I think it would be something where the ag program, which is kind of chump change when you look at $1.43 trillion over 10 years, $140 billion. But do you think we're in a sound trajectory so that ag and all the other things that we depend on here in the federal government, will it be there in a way that is going to be sustainable in the long run with all this borrowing and spending, which is now built into the new budget?
Senator, I'm sure you and I are probably going to disagree on this a bit. I think the president's right when he says it's important for this country to rebuild the middle class from the bottom up and the middle out, and that's going to require some investment. It's going to require an investment in a transformed economy. I think agriculture has a role to play in that. I think the president is right in terms of looking at his budget, where he's proposing deficit reduction with the understanding that those who are doing extremely well in this economy ought to be paying their fair share. You and I probably disagree about that. I think it's important for us.
By the way, I don't disagree with that.
Okay. Well,
I would believe everybody should pay their fair share. I'm just saying that even if you give all of that, it still bridges the gap on borrowed money. Are you comfortable, like I'm very uncomfortable with, borrowing this from future generations? I mean, we already do, and we've now structuralized it since 2000 to where I don't know that that's sustainable. You can't do it anywhere else. Sooner or later, it impacts even programs like ag that need a healthy federal government.
Well, yeah, I think if you take a look at some of the investments that are being made, particularly in infrastructure, I mean, how else can you finance infrastructure? I mean, that's how businesses finance.
Well, you'd have to do what you did as a governor. You're going to have to find ways, like every other place does, to where you don't spend so much money in other areas. Unless you're saying that everything we do here is absolutely needed, and it'd be like asking your kids at Thanksgiving, will you lend me some money for something I want to do, and maybe the grandkids as well. That's about what we're doing as a country.
If you want to know what my biggest beef is about this place, it's this. I asked my team, and these numbers may not be totally accurate, but I think that the gist of them are right. I asked my team of the discretionary budget, non-defense, because I understand that that's a kind of a, we can't touch defense, we can't cut defense.
That ought to be on the table too. We waste just as much money there as we do through the rest of the government.
But not all of your colleagues believe that.
And I'd agree.
All right, so I asked the question, how much has that increased? How much has that budget increased over the last 10 years or so? And they came back and they said 28%. Now, I don't know if that's what they told me, 28%. I said, well, how much is the ag portion of that increased? 14%. All right? So I wasn't great in math, but if the average is 28% and I'm only getting 14%, that means somebody else is getting a whole lot more than 28%. And my concern is there's not an understanding within this city of the significance and importance and reach of the Department of Agriculture.
I think we're probably on somewhat the same wavelength. And for the public out there listening, this place is doing it on borrowed money to make up the difference. Because what I said earlier, over 50 years, revenue into the federal government has averaged 17.5% of GDP. We're bumping that now to 20 in terms of what we think we can raise in revenue. That's never happened in the past, and we're spending at 25%. WOTUS is the thing I hear the most in the bailiwick of agriculture. I hear more complaints about that than any other thing because they deal with that. They've had conservation officers in Indiana running people down on the back 40 when they're doing ditch maintenance on ditches that hardly ever have any water in it. What is going on there? Are you actually tracking comments from farmers? Do we do that to see how much complaints you're getting compared to what I'm hearing back in Indiana?
Certainly sensitive to this, but let's remember two things about WOTUS. One, Congress has established the Clean Water Act, which is what gives rise to WOTUS, and courts have directed the EPA to actually implement the law. All right, so it's not like they have a choice. They have to implement the law. The question is, how do they implement it? We've had two rules. We had the Obama rule, the Trump rule. What this EPA attempted to do is to take or to detract from the Trump rule and the Obama rule to come up with something that they think is reasonable.
But do you track comments coming in?
We totally understand.
And is that something you'd share with the committee here in terms of what you're hearing from farmers about WOTUS?
What you're hearing is uncertainty. What you're hearing is uncertainty. Is this in or is this out? And I think basically what we need to have is certainty in the program. We need to, at some point in time, to get it out of the courts and have certainty. And then we need to determine if there are issues or problems, how USDA's resources, NRCS resources, can be used to help and assist farmers in whatever implementation.
Because I'm running out of time here, and I am going to introduce a bill, the Farmer Informed WOTUS Act. I'd hope you'd be behind it. One quick question, hearing it a lot too, in foreign ownership of ag ground. Senator Tester and I are introducing a bill on that. It's starting to cascade across the country among state legislatures addressing it. Where are you at there? And the four players that you hear mostly about, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, should they be owning farm ground in this country?
Well, first of all, how much farmland do you think they own?
I'm worried about owning more in the future. Do you think you're okay with those four players? Just them?
I have concerns, and I particularly have concerns if they're purchasing land that is adjacent to or near military installations or other ways in which security could be compromised, for sure. As you look at prohibitions, understand that they own, between the four of them, roughly 330,000 acres. The five largest owners of foreign land in this country are Canada, Netherlands, UK, Germany, and Japan. And so I think the question is, you're going to restrict those folks. If you don't restrict those and restrict other folks, how do you do this in a way that's...
Senator Tester and I will probably be back to get your opinion on it, and hopefully you'll be behind the bill. Thank you.